Everybody, it's me, your buddy Dave from thedarkstuff.com and the Dark Stuff channel on YouTube. Thanks a lot for checking out my latest video. This week's video is the next installment in my rock and roll book club series. Now, in this series, my guests and I have a classic book club type discussion about books on rock music, about the music industry, rock star biographies, and even novels written by rock stars. This time around, we're discussing the 2010 memoir Lips Unsealed by Go-Go's lead singer Belinda Carlisle. Her revealing biography details the rise and fall of the Go-Go's, her solo career, her marriage and family, and oh yeah, her 30-year drug addiction. My guests Shelley and Jennifer return, and if you'd like more information on either of them, check the description box below. Make sure to check out the rest of the Rock and Roll Book Club playlist so you can see all of the previous episodes from this series. Thanks as always for watching, everyone. Hey, so we are back with our second edition of Rock and Roll Book Club, and I'm back with Shelley and Jennifer from the last one. And this time we are doing this book right here, Lips Unsealed from Belinda Carlisle. Start with a little bit of background on Belinda Carlisle. She is one of the most significant and well-known rock stars of the last, 40 years or so. Her band, the Go-Go's, was a massive band. They are credited as being the first all-female rock band that wrote their own songs and had a #1 record with their debut album from 1981. They're considered pioneering. Everybody to some degree loves the Go-Go's. They're kind of hard to hate. They did have a brief career, after which Belinda Carlisle had a pretty successful solo career for a couple of years, and then it's more like a nostalgia thing from maybe like the early 90s till the present day. What are your early thoughts or impressions about Belinda Carlisle and or the Go-Go's? Start with you, Shelley.
Yeah, as a kid, I was obsessed. So, I was in elementary school when the Go-Go's were popular, and I just remember seeing their videos and singing along to their awesome songs, and in particular being like really into Belinda Carlisle. Like, she was just so pretty and so cool, and I totally looked up to her. She was kind of in the group of musicians, female musicians, that I looked up to as a young person. Another one would be Blondie. I remember when I was probably 5, I told my mom I wasn't going to brush my hair anymore because Blondie didn't. Obviously, I meant Deborah Harry, but hey, I was like 6. Don't blame it on me. But yeah, I just like really looked up to her, and I remember that album coming out where their, hair is in the towels and towel around them and the face cream, and it was just like, whoa, what are they doing? Yeah, that's the one.
It's a pretty iconic cover. And then on the back, they're in the tub.
Yes, we read about that. The tub. I mean, they were great. Shelley's right. And she was like the beautiful front leader with, and I'm brown hair, brown eyes, and I've never looked like that in my life. And she was just so pretty at that age. I think I was probably in 8th or 9th grade. I mean, when was it, David?
Well, the first album came out in 81.
Okay.
So that'd have been like 4th or 5th grade or something like that, maybe. For
81.
Us.
No,
81, we were 10.
81, I guess we were 10.
Yeah.
Yeah, right. Okay. Yeah. So yeah, around that age, I just, they're fun. They're poppy. It's a fun sing-along song. It's a good party song. I thought they were great.
Yeah. I mean, I've always kind of liked them. Who didn't have, as a guy, who didn't have a little crush on Belinda Carlisle back in the day? I mean,
as a girl too.
It was pretty clear.
Yeah.
She was very, very pretty, and just has a face that just hasn't changed. She's still to this day. I mean, I follow her on Instagram. She still has that classic like movie star face. I mean, she just does. She has a classic look that doesn't really fade with time. It can change. You change hairstyles, you change this, you change that, you change clothes, whatever, but ultimately she has that timeless kind of
Yeah.
place.
She's just beautiful. Yeah.
And, obviously the Go-Go's were an important band, and they, broke a lot of barriers for people, and all of that. So they're super significant in terms of music, and that's always important to me. But then, as her solo career, I didn't follow as much.
Mad About You for sure is exactly what I was thinking. Yeah.
Yes. And but there was one like Circle in the Sand.
Yep.
Circle in the Sand.
That's kind of as
I
far
Get
as
Weak. I Get Weak was a hit.
Yeah.
Heaven is a Place on Earth. No, she had hits. I mean, no question. She had hits. And in terms of the other Go-Go's, they never really did. Jane Weedland had a couple of solo records, and they were good, but they didn't do anything. They didn't yield any hits or whatever. So Belinda had the advantage being the voice and being the front person, even though she didn't write any of those classic Go-Go songs or had very little to do with the writing of it. She benefited from being that front person.
Mm-hmm.
And that ties into a lot of things that I think we're going to be getting into and delving into the book, of how she got certain advantages, but are they really the advantage? Like, it's a double-edged sword for her constantly. Like everything is almost like a double-edged sword in her career and the way she's had to deal with stuff. I just had it instead of a question. I just wrote the word drugs as in my notes. Not a question, just like an open-ended thing. Like, drugs were a problem for her from early on. I don't know what her story is, whether it was like a weird home life difficulty there, but clearly that was an escape for her from a super early age.
Yes, absolutely. And I mean, if you look at everything with her eating disorder and how terrible that was, and I mean, she was so pretty. And I feel like throughout her life, you're getting chubby, who's the pretty chubby girl? Everything revolved around her weight. And I think I'd written that as a question I wanted to talk about. And, her looks were kind of everything because she was so pretty. She is so pretty, but that weight kind of was what anybody in her family said, like that, and even the critics, like that was all they saw. Yeah, and that it was the first thing they say about her.
So incredibly unfair too, because she was so attractive back then, and like you say, still is. As a kid, I don't know, but obviously that was hardwired into her brain at some point that she is too fat and has to always be worrying about her weight, and that part of her brain thinks that her only real value is her appearance. Because throughout the book, she dismisses her singing on certain albums, just says, I phoned it in, I sucked on that one. I wasn't doing this, I wasn't doing that, and kind of dismisses a lot of her accomplishments, and focuses exclusively on what she was wearing on that tour, and that she lost a certain amount of weight, and that her hair looked good, and this and that. So it is so hardwired into her brain to equate success with her appearance as well.
But also not uncommon.
Not uncommon at all.
And if you think about it, just our society as a whole puts women in a specific mind frame about how we look, how much we weigh, are we pretty? Are we not? So much value is placed on that societally. And thank God it's finally starting to change. But, when you have those societal factors, which were very strong, at the beginning of Belinda Carlisle's career, and then you have, your mother reinforcing that, that's basically inescapable. I mean,
sure. And from an early age, she was getting it from an early age.
And
right.
I sort of think that part of the appeal of punk rock and why she got so into that scene, even though it was brief, but because that sort of thing wasn't important, right? She was considered a musician just because she said she was. You're in a band just because you say you are. And that's it.
You look like you are.
And you look like you wear weird clothes, you have crazy hairstyles, whatever. But she was definitely not looking conventionally attractive. She had a unique sort of style, and it didn't matter. Like that wasn't what her contribution was made to be. Right now, it was an escape from this constant like nitpicking of You need to look a certain way. You need to act a certain way. You need to be a certain way. And that was just thrown out the window in that punk rock world. That they didn't care back then.
You know, punk rockers or alternative or whatever. The bond between people is that like it's us against all the people who are normal, you know? And so it's sort of a collection of societal rejects, even though they're not rejects, but there is that sense of family that, and she really portrayed that in the book, I think, you know, just how they really were each other's supporters, and that's where you went, and she felt most at home there. And coming from a complicated household, family life, you know, it seems like she was seeking refuge to a certain degree.
Some of her drug stories are, she's up there in terms of legendary rock star drug stories. I mean, I was just, you know, you see the elements of the addict behavior, like when she first moved in with her husband, and yet she kept her own apartment on the side. And when he would go to bed at night, she would leave, go to her own apartment, do coke all night, and then come back before he would wake up. That's like, wow,
Yeah.
what? I mean, you know, totally leading this double life. And the fact that she said at one point in the book that touring for her was an escape from her life, and that all she wanted to do was lock herself in a hotel room and do coke like all day, all night. And it was just like, wow. I mean, it's like that shit, you know, there are deep rooted people would be like, oh, she likes to party and all that. And yeah, there are some great partying stories of the Go-Go's. But sometimes when that party goes too long, it's not fun anymore, and it becomes sad. Mm-hmm. And it became sad for her at a point by the late 80s, I think, really. And she kept doing drugs up until 2007. But I think it became sad at that point. What happened as the book got further along, when she would talk about it, is it wasn't fun. It did start to get into a sad element.
I agree.
For
sure. It was like Groundhog Day. You're still partying. You had a baby. You're back to partying. You're gone. I'm like, just lady, you know.
She wasn't the only one who was seriously self-medicating and having this like serious double life of like, I'm presenting myself one way, but in reality, I'm this totally different person. The life of the party thing is more a sad thing, not like something to be celebrated. But I thought I'd throw that in there. I'm sorry to cut you off.
That kind of mirrors, you know, how she's a rock star on the outside, but behind the scenes, you know, she's someone who has the same, if not more, insecurities as a normal person, who doesn't think that she even deserves the spot that she has, you know. So I think that sort of double life happens a few different ways for her.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think so too. It's like she was never comfortable in her skin, even with her mother-in-law, and just kind of, I felt like she was running all the time. She was so busy. Mm-hmm. She was doing so much coke. She just could never settle, you know.
I would like to see an accounting statement of exactly how much of her fortune she pissed away on cocaine, because it has to be a tremendous amount of money.
Yes.
There was definitely a point in the book that I was like, oh my God. And I don't remember what line it was, but she said something about how she had spent a ton of money on it. And I was like, the dollar signs started just like, ding, 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 ding. I'm like, oh my God. Could you imagine? I mean,
and she's very lucky in the sense that she always had a career that she could fall back on. The Go-Go's could always get back together for a couple more shows. She could go to Europe and do a solo tour because she maintained a big audience in Europe throughout, still to this day, I think. You know, her audience in America kind of faded a bit, but not in Europe. She could still go to Europe and Japan. So she had that crutch. She could just keep it kind of going that whole time.
Well, to your point about double-edged swords, I mean, she's lucky that she could always have that as income, but also that enabled the behavior too.
Absolutely.
Know?
Because
like she didn't really have an opportunity to hit rock bottom.
Because doing these tours, these tours wasn't even so much about the music. Like she said, it was like, I get to go do coke all the time and my husband's not around, like telling you, like asking me questions and, you know, this and that. And it's like, it's just an escape from life at that point. And it's like, you'd think, well, if she did have this sort of troubled life, like that home life would be her stability. She had a son, she had a loving husband who seemed very supportive and willing to look the other way a lot with her drug
all the
use
time.
all the time.
Yeah.
Believed her bullshit. And even when they would have confrontations about it, and the way she described it in the book, they wouldn't barely talk for a day or two, and then they'd kind of ease back in, and everything was sort of hunky dory. Look, I don't know. Hard to judge someone's marriage. They've been together since the 80s. It's like it obviously somehow works for them. Seems to be the only stable thing in a very, very unstable life.
Yes,
I have
agreed.
to say that's one of my favorite parts of the book was that, and I think she did a really good job describing it, is how her husband could see past that mask of drug use and through to her heart, really. And I think if I were to guess, that's what connected them, like he didn't love her for her fame or, because she's in a cool band or any of that. He loved her despite this drug problem. And he just really saw what she was at the core of her being. And, in some ways it's like, wow, how could you stick by someone through so many cycles of that? I mean, it just seems so heartbreaking, but the fact that he did is amazing. And, the fact that they're still married after all these years is incredible. And it just seems like, they had a foundation of love that really helped them both get through all of this shit.
Well, look, not to sound morbid or whatever, or venture into speculation, but supposing their marriage had ended in the 90s or something, the guy just walked away, was like, I've had enough, forget it, before they had a kid, and he took off. How would her life have been different, with all of her binging and the way that she's going? She might be one of these rock and roll casualties. She didn't have that stability to go to. When she was off the road, it was, I'm back at my apartment alone doing coke 24/7. I don't have, there's no reason to turn it off when you go home. So he saved her life in a lot of ways, in my opinion.
I think so too.
Yeah. I would have, I would have thought he would have done it a little bit sooner, but like numerous times throughout that book, but and I mean, she's off again, and then she's going, she was always, as we talked about, she was always isolating and doing coke alone. Like, that's not fun.
Coke is a party drug. I don't see why people do it alone, but you know what?
Well, it starts as a party drug, but then that's the problem.
Right. She
started doing it because it was fun and she was partying with all her friends, but then, that's when substance abuse disorder takes its grasp.
That's when the party never ends. This book was published in 2010, and in it she states she hasn't had a drink or done any drugs since 2007. That was 3 years before the book was published. She said, nothing, 100% done. Now, I believe her when she wrote that book in 2010 that was the truth. Now it's 13 years later. Do you think that's still the situation, or do you think she may have slipped up? I wouldn't know. I don't read gossip I don't know what's going on with Belinda Carlisle, but my feeling is I definitely think she's fucked up since then, like had slip ups. It's just, there were so many times, you want to give her the benefit of the doubt, hope she'll never do it again. But you know what? She brought up John Entwistle from The Who in the book. He had quit for years, got back into it, went on tour one night and was partying in a Vegas hotel room, and now he's dead. Right. So I'm sure he told everyone in his family he was done with it. And he probably told the guys in The Who, I'm never doing that shit again. I'm over it. I'm done. So I just wonder, because of her constant saying I'm done and then not being done, I don't know. What do you think? In the past 13 years, she has remained 100% sober? Not a judgment. I'm just for your curiosity.
I do. I think she has.
Okay, well, good. That's the optimistic view. Shelley, are you taking that optimistic view?
I'm gonna take the I cheated view and look it up because I was so curious. And so I read more like skimmed a 2023 article in the Guardian, interview with her, and she's still married and still sober. And I have to say, I mean, I think it's pretty amazing that she's been able to do that.
Yeah.
And you mentioned that moment, and she saw him die and was like, that could be me. Like, and I think that was a real turning point for her, even though she didn't necessarily get sober right then.
Yeah.
But, that turning point combined with how much she transformed her life and found other ways to find peace and things to believe in, and anchors through yoga and meditation and chanting and Buddhism. And I think that's probably a huge part of her success.
What period of Belinda's life did you enjoy reading about the most, or did you think was the best part of the book? Who wants to go first?
I will.
Okay, Jen.
I really enjoyed reading about the relationship that the Go-Go's all had with each other, and the friendships and the intricacies, within the group, and just their rise and just their journey to the top and then to like nowhere. So I enjoyed reading about that. And I also like her relationship was really, really lovely. We talked about that. And I feel like it just watching her get to a point of where she was able to appreciate, understand, and be a mother and be checked into her relationship and off of coke, because we never thought that would happen. But yeah, I would say those are my two favorite parts.
A lot of dealers had a tough year in 2007 when she stopped being a customer,
I have to agree with Jennifer. I loved reading about her relationship with her husband and how they met and how eventually it led to her transformation. And it was so happy and surprising that she was able to pull herself out of, her drug use, and with the support of her husband. I just really loved that. It was very hopeful and inspiring. Especially the story about how they met, where wasn't it like they were supposed to meet up and she blew him off, and then he ran into her while she was having dinner, and he just like threw his card at her and was like, call me, I guess.
Yeah.
And at that moment I'm like, this guy's a prick, man. Screw him. And then you come to find out that, they finally go on this date, and it's like, no, he just was like so into her and so shy. That was all he could mutter. That was all he could eke out of himself.
Well, I mean, first of all, you're talking about, he wasn't interested necessarily in a rock star. He did love Belinda Carlisle, the person, but at the time you're seeing the Belinda Carlisle, the famous mid 80s sex symbol, Belinda Carlisle. And just to have the stones to even give your card to her in the first place. I mean, you gotta have the some serious cojones to even think like, I'm even in this woman's league, like not only because she's so good looking, but because she is a fucking super famous person at this point.
Yeah.
And his parents were famous, and maybe that conditioned him to not care that much about celebrity. But because they were his mom was it was some sort of actor or something, or dad. His dad was. Yeah.
What did his mom do?
Through great parties, from what I remember.
Yeah, through great parties.
Yeah, every night, parties every night.
Very much into the parties.
So,
no, I liked all that stuff that you guys just said about her relationship and everything with her husband. The early days of the Go-Go's. I did know a little bit more about that from watching the documentary. That Showtime doc is very good.
I've watched it.
It was good. And the behind the music that they did, which was about the late 90s, early 2000s, right when the Go-Go's put out a new album. It was kind of a promotional thing when they put out a new album and they were sort of back together. And that was a really good one because they were very honest about shit and were very frank about the problems in the band. And as you see in the book, when she is describing stuff, some of their issues never really go away. Like they still have conflict all the time when they get back together for too long a period of time. Like, and that's just,
How it is.
you meet somebody when you're 21 and now it's
Yeah.
you're 55 or whatever. And it's like, how many friends when you're 55 do you are the same people that when you were 21 or whatever? It's just, but yet you're tied to these people forever. They've obviously figured out a way to make it work. I thought that part was interesting. I thought the origins of her solo career were pretty interesting. She's managed to salvage a pretty serious career, especially not being the writer of any of the classic songs that she's known for.
Mhm.
None.
Wild,
I mean,
yeah.
you know, so that's a weird thing, but it's not that uncommon in pop music, really. There are a lot of singers who are just singers. She's known as
Yeah.
the singer,
Which
but
is
she
still
was
a huge talent and amazing.
Yes.
she is.
Well, I
And
was thinking about this too. Oh, go ahead,
I
David.
was going to say, she's smart enough to understand when the Go-Go's broke up, she brought Charlotte Caffrey along with her. Charlotte's a writer. That's important. The bass player that came in at the very end of the Go-Go's, after Jane Weedland quits and Kathy Valentine switches to guitar and they bring in a new bass player, she brought that bass player along with her solo too. And that's the woman who wrote Mad About You.
Mhm.
So she obviously understood, like, I need to, what I don't have in terms of like my songwriting thing, she latched on to smart people and was like, okay, the Go-Go's are over, but I'm still keeping a Go-Go with me. One of these people who wrote the big songs because I need songs, you know? So she is no dummy in terms of how that works out. She's a little bit more self-aware of her, I think, limitations than maybe she even wanted to present in the book.
Absolutely. It's kind of like, I was thinking about this. It's kind of like Linda Ronstadt. Like Linda Ronstadt didn't write anything. Did she,
Right, she's
Dave?
all about her voice. No, just
Yeah,
all
it's
about her
all about
singing.
her
Yeah.
voice. She's, you know, a voice artist, a song artist. I mean, Glenn Campbell, he didn't write much. I mean, this is, I think it says a lot about a person when they recognize what they're able to do and what they're not able to do, as you were saying.
Yeah.
And she knew what she needed to do with herself to get that done. And, you know, the music, it's fine. It's poppy. It's fun. It's, you know, whatever. It reminds me of high school, but that's okay. It was fun.
Yeah.
But, you know, I think anything, you know, it's a bummer she missed out on that Celine Dion song, you know, that Celine Dion went and recorded. And, you know, I think she was kind of at the mercy of what others presented her with. And then she, you know, would do the best she could with it, and which was great. I mean, she's a huge star, but I don't know.
Also, and this was not mentioned in the book, but I just happen to know this little trivia fact. Evan Dando from the Lemonheads wrote a song in, I think, 1995. It's on the Come On Feel the Lemonheads album. I can't remember the title of it. I don't have it in front of me, but he wrote it with the intention of giving it to Belinda Carlisle because she was looking for new songs.
Here's a totally lame-ass song that I wrote for Belinda Carlisle, and I decided to do it anyway because it's called I'll Do It Anyway, and like, fuck it, man. It was too late to put it on her album.
I'm wondering if she had done that song. I mean, Evan Dando was a big star in 1995. Like, maybe that would have been a cool hit or whatever for her. Who knows? But that was another song she passed on that was maybe a mistake, but who knows?
Yeah. Yeah. I was wanting a little bit more gossip. I was wanting a little bit more juice. I love the part where she said, I mean, like, I've read so many of these books, and this one I'm just kind of like, okay, go get sober. You've done enough coke. You know what you feel like.
Yeah.
But moving on from that, I loved it when she said, when David Lee Roth was telling, you know, people that he had slept with her, she's like, no, didn't I mean, she said, you know, Robert Palmer was awful and didn't speak to her the whole time. The story about Rod Stewart was funny, where they were partying all night long. And he's like, I have to sleep. They're like, you're kidding. Like, he had to sleep.
There were so many stories. Just wild and crazy stories, that things that probably would be fleshed out in other books didn't get fleshed out, where it would be like one sentence like, yeah, on that night I broke my leg and I had to wear a cast on stage for the next 6 months. Next chapter, you know?
Yeah. Like, and where's the rest
those
of that?
Things, I was like, whoa, wait, what? And like the first time that she quit Coke, she was like, yeah, I just quit. And it's like, but there's more to the story there, because that's not how that works.
Right.
You know, so there were places that I thought, wow, she
Well,
just
I
doesn't have
think,
room. She doesn't have the
yeah,
word count to talk about a broken leg, you know?
I think that she has had such a fascinating life, but the book isn't presented in a way that's that fascinating. You know what I mean? Like it's more
Agreed.
a recitation of facts. This happened, then this happened, then this happened, then this happened. There is some reflecting. Okay, looking
Yeah.
back, I did, there. So it's not strictly that, but it's mostly that. It's not really colored with a lot of like great writing that could have been fleshed out with a co-writer or a ghostwriter. And I looked at the book. I didn't see any names of anyone else being involved. So she obviously had an editor, but like most of these celebrity biographies, usually there's sort of another writer involved also.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And this one doesn't appear to have it unless it is a true ghostwriter and they were paid to not to say they didn't do anything, but it is written by somebody who's not a normal writer. So I believe that it's just strictly her.
Yeah,
You
it
know?
would probably have been better if there were another professional writer involved.
Yes, I agree.
Yeah, because I
agree.
think she does have a really interesting story. I mean, there's no question. And Belinda Carlisle, as a rock star, just talking about her music as the singer of the Go-Go's, considering how significant that group is, that right there is, interesting material. That's why there's a biography. That's why there's the Showtime doc. That's why there's Behind the Music. That's why the Go-Go's can still go out and tour 42 years after their first album. That is significant enough. I think that the book is just, it's a little bit bland and a little bit like just sort of a recitation of facts. And I would like a little bit more, like you say, maybe a little bit more juice, a little bit more something.
Storytelling.
Yeah, a little more storytelling, really.
Yeah.
I mean, and maybe not every party story needs to be told, but maybe you elaborate more on the ones that you do tell and tell about the after effects, like the next day. And like, because really what you don't hear when she's on tour is, okay, she parties and does coke in her room all the time. But then at some point they have to leave the room and go do stuff like travel to the next town, go do the show, go do sound check, go do interview. Like what was going on during that part of it? Like, so I felt like some of that was left out and I would have liked a little bit more elaboration on that. To flesh out the stories a little bit more,
Yeah, like it started to get a little bit tough, just to kind of see, like you said before, Jennifer, the same cycle repeating itself.
Yes.
And I know that's part of the point, is that that's how addiction works. But I think it would have benefited from, take the most representative example, really put us in your shoes, really make us feel what was happening there, and then tell us this happens 20 more times.
Yes.
I think that would have had a stronger effect on the reader.
Yeah, it was kind of fluffy. It was fine.
And I think also when she's talking about her music and her career, she's a little bit more detailed about the Go-Go's and more about what it was like creating the music. And then when it's her solo career, it's kind of like, and then we signed this contract and then I did my album and it did. Okay. It was like, well, you're skipping over a lot of stuff. Like what happened from the big, like, so a lot of that stuff was just like completely ignored. And like, that could have been fleshed out a little bit more about what she was doing, who she was working with. Because that was kind of, it's sort of like, I was in the Go-Go's and we were really successful. And then I had these hit records. And then it's like, here I am today. I mean, but what was the rest of it?
What was interesting? You're absolutely right. And what was interesting was that when they brought George Harrison in and she's like, it was just a waste of money. And it was meh, like, I think she threw, I was just kind of like, she just threw everything at the wall to see what worked. I felt like is what she did.
Well, and apparently George Harrison didn't know her name, but knew who she like she was the singer of the Go-Go's. But he made some comment about, and maybe this might not have been in the book. Maybe I might have read this separately, but where he said something like he did some kind of weird solo on a song. And he said like the best solo of that style that he ever did was on some track. He doesn't even remember the name, by the singer of the Go-Go's.
Oh, I'm in love. Oh, I'm in.
Yeah, I feel like my experience after reading the book is like the mirror shattering. Like, my innocence has been taken as I was such a young child when I loved her, and she just was perfect in every way. And now after reading the book, it's like, holy fucking coke, Batman. Like, Jesus, never would have thought that beautiful person I looked up to, would be fighting such demons and just have such an incredibly insane life in that way. I mean, it humanizes her, certainly, in my eyes.
Yeah.
And gives her more dimension. But yeah, it's never what I would have guessed about her. And but I do really appreciate her for working through that. I just really am very impressed with how she took the reins once she finally put them in her hands.
Yeah.
Yeah.
My impression of her really didn't change that much. I mean, only because I guess I did already have a little bit of a preparation for her story with the behind the music and stuff, because I knew that was an issue. I didn't know how the depth of her drug issue. And I appreciate her candor on that, because that is something that some people would tend to hold back on. Now, yes. I think we all thought she should have gone a little bit further with some of the sketchy shit that maybe would illustrate the stories a little bit better, but whatever. The point is, she was pretty candid about how much drugs she was doing and the sketchy ways in which she was getting it, and the way she was hiding it from her family and probably from her manager and her band. And, I don't know that they knew the extent of it. I mean, who knows? So I thought that stuff was all interesting. I didn't really have a different impression of her. I mean, I guess, like I said, with her post Go-Go's career, I felt like even she was like, she didn't have a lot of depth to talk about her solo career. Like, there was not a lot of stuff to talk about, which is kind of like mirrors the fact that I think her solo music is kind of fluffy. And so there's not much to talk about anyways. And maybe that's a real it's almost a soft admission of that to a certain degree, because there's no real in-depth telling of like the recording of Mad About You or whatever. I mean, whereas you really talked about the Go-Go's and when they recorded Vacation and this and that. And so it's a different approach.
It just wasn't that deep. I mean, she kind of whatever came her way, she'd do. And, listen, again, it's kind of poppy fluff, but it's not near as good as the Go-Go's were. But in all fairness, I did a video a little while ago about a Jane Wiedlin record. She was one of the primary writers of the Go-Go's. Without the Go-Go's, her songs weren't as good. Like, just presented her way, without the filter of the rest of the Go-Go's, without Belinda singing, the songs were like, they're okay, but like, okay, so she didn't really go anywhere. They needed to be together. It was those guys. The power of many was better than one.
That's the difference. The Go-Go's, it's those five. That's the core. That's the only reason anyone's really interested in Belinda Carlisle or Jane Wiedlin or any of them, if we're just being honest.
Yeah.
And that's the essence of it. And I guess that's what I'm sort of realizing now. And I think she does realize that without actually specifically saying it in the book.
Yeah, I think you're right.
I'm calling BS on Belinda Carlisle about her Playboy pictorial. When she says that she instructed Playboy not to airbrush the photos and somehow they did it against her will, I'm calling bullshit on that. Even if she did say that, Playboy was never going to not airbrush. They airbrush everything. Yeah. That's the nature of what they do. Okay. I used to look at Playboy sounds like religiously really familiar, as a kid. Dave. I used to look at Playboy religiously as a child. There was never a blemish on any woman ever, because it's all airbrushed. So I'm calling bullshit on that. She knows she was okay with the airbrushing or whatever. So what, but okay. That's my one thing where I think she was being a little bit less than honest on that particular point. That's it.
Walking through the summer sand, waves crash.
Yeah, one observation that I really hadn't thought of until you were talking is about how incredibly honest she was about her cocaine use. And I mean, I thought about that, of course, because it's so clear that she's, unabashed about what she did. But the thing that's occurring to me now is I feel like that's a symbol of her sobriety, her commitment to her sobriety, being able to say, here's everything that I did. It's crazy.
Because she lied about
and
it for years.
After a lifetime of lying about it and covering it up, for her to go back and be able to admit everything, that's commitment.
I wonder if there was anything she admitted in the book that her husband read and was like, I didn't know that.
Oh God, right? I know.
I don't remember this story about you going to some drug dealer's house in Brazil. Like what? I didn't hear about that one,
Well, and like if you had a lifetime of lies, you don't remember who you told what to.
Oh,
so
yeah.
I'm sure some things came out.
Absolutely.
Some few surprises there.
We talked about it. Like, you're telling me she didn't have wicked, horrible mornings after doing all that coke, or staying up all night long and then not even sleeping and going and getting on stage. I mean, I know a couple of times she touched on like not having her best shows or having that type of stuff, but I wish she would been a little bit more candid about the brutal parts, the awful, ugly, gross, how she felt physically. I mean, just to get a little bit more in touch. I mean, she did so much coke. It's like, you're great. Okay, you're good. I'm going to stop tomorrow. Okay.
Yeah, no, 100%, because you really would have hammered home the depth of the addiction. You hear the stories, but it's more like, and then I did this, and then I did that, and then this happened, and then I lied, and then I came clean, and then, okay. So again, let's hear about it. So you could hear less instances of it and just more details of a few key stories that really sell the story. Like, yeah, you were on a 3-day coke binge. Tell us about that third day.
Yes.
That's what I want to know about. That's what I want to hear about. How was the show? How did people treat you? Did anyone in the band confront you about it? Did you, whatever. So that kind of stuff I would have liked to have heard. And, again, you can only, she chose to talk about what she chose to talk about. And it is what it is. It is remarkably honest in terms of the drug use, and that part is good. And owning up to a little bit of, she kind of half-assed it maybe on this album or whatever. And it's like, you don't like to hear an artist say that, especially if you like that particular album. And then you hear the singer being like, I kind of phoned it in on that one. You're like, oh, I loved that. Like, what? Now it sucks now. I mean,
one last thing I'll say is,
okay.
It was surprising to me how much of an asshole she seemed like for a big chunk of the book, and that she was comfortable actually sharing that. Maybe it's easier when you've kind of rebounded and you've found yourself in a new foundation, but there was a big long stretch there where I was like, Jesus, she sucked. Like, man, this was an asshole.
Yeah, she was difficult. I mean, at certain points, it's like, it's now she reflecting back on it all these years later. That's the thing. There was some serious honesty in there that she could have held back on. Other people might have. I'm glad she didn't. Yeah. That she really did present it. And it wasn't like everybody else fucked up but me. It was like, no, I fucked up big time too. It wasn't just everybody else. It was me too. And so there was no, I didn't hear the one positive thing. I didn't hear her blaming other people for much of anything. It wasn't,
she owned it.
Blame others for this. It was always like her issue. And she finally took full responsibility for it or whatever. But she didn't spend any time like blaming others, even though she talked about her stepdad and her bio dad and kind of re-entering her life later on and etc. But like there was no blaming. And I think that was good. They were wild. The Go-Go's were pretty wild. And the fact that they didn't live, if they lived in the era of the cell phone, they would have been exposed big time, and it would be a totally different story. They wouldn't have been thought of as America's sweethearts. They might have been, that thing would have ended pretty quickly. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's like what nobody knew is they were fucking punk rock, like, which is pretty sweet. I don't know.
They went to pop. Yeah.
Yeah, no, the Go-Go's are great, and the songs still hold up. I played the Go-Go's Essentials on Apple Music, And they threw in a couple Belinda songs in there too, but it was like every single one of these is good.
Yeah.
Oh, one more
They're
thing.
fine.
Yeah,
Can we talk about the photos included in the book?
sure.
And especially, I was so happy to see a photo of the garbage bag dress that she had written about,
Oh yeah.
where she just put on a garbage bag and like a belt, and she looked so cool. I was like, man, she is so cool,
Yeah.
you know? And then seeing her photos of her later, where she's in India by the river and praying, and it was like, wow, that's what a transformation. And
Oh,
I just
yeah, I
thought
think
it
we're
was
talking
cool
about
that they, yeah.
This
Okay,
here.
it's
Yep.
she's in the
right
group
there.
there you go. Yeah.
Thanks a lot for making it all the way to the end, everyone. It is much appreciated. Please like this video. Leave a comment telling us your thoughts on either the video, the book, Belinda Carlisle, the Go-Go's, whatever. If you have any suggestions for future books for the book club, that is the appropriate place to leave it. Thanks again for watching, everyone. We'll see you soon. Bye-bye.